Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Rifqi Iman Salafi. I'm here. I will deliver my proposal research presentation with the title Translations Orientation of Indonesian Cultural Terms in Novel Ronggeng Dugu Paruk, translated into English in the Dancer. We begin from background of the study. A Portuguese writer, José Saramago, ever said that writers create national literature with their language, that world literature is written by translator. This quote means that translators' role is important to make a national work to be world literature or world work. But from translation process, it is known that there will be many things belongs to cultural item that will lose or disappear. From this fact, it is interesting to talk about translational orientation or ideology. This research will be focused on technique, method, and orientation of Indonesian cultural terms of Ronggeng Duku Paruk translated into English in the novel The Dancer. This research is important because it will reveal translating process of cultural novel and that can be consideration in inserting the target text, especially the cultural terms. The discussion about ideology of translation or orientation of translation is common among scholars. I will tell you about three research talking about ideology of translation or orientation of translation. The first is research written by Pahlawanita and friend in 2019 with title the implementation of translational ideology of cultural terms in Andrea Hirata's novel Laskar Pelangi. The second is research under the title The Ideology of Translation in Translating Cultural Terms found in Pramoedya Anantatur's work Bumi Manusia into This Earth of Mankind. It is written by Sitorus at 2015. The third research under the title The Translation Ideology of Cultural Word used in translation of Oki Madasari's work Kerumunan Terakhir into The Last Crowd. It is written by Latifah in 2018. I will make my research different from the previous researches with three things. The first is the corpus. I use novel Ronggeng Dugu Paruk and its translation, The Dancer. The second is the method in deciding translations orientation. And the third is I will add the suggestion of translation to make target text better. Now, I will tell you about research question. The first is about cultural terms. What categories of cultural terms are found in novel Ronggeng Dugu Paruk and their translation in The Dancer? The second is about technique of translation. How are technique of translation applied to the translation of cultural terms in novel Ronggeng Dugu Paruk and their translation The Dancer? The third is about method of translation. How are methods of translation applied to the translation of cultural terms in novel Ronggeng Dugu Baruk and their translation, the dancer? The third is about orientation of translation. What is orientation of Ronggeng Dugu Baruk's cultural terms translation? From research questions that I have already mentioned before, we may conclude that this research is aimed to the first, to identify cultural terms in Novel Ronggeng Dugu Baruk. The second is to identify technique used in translating cultural terms in Novel Ronggeng Dugu Baruk to the dancer. And the third is to identify methods used in translating cultural terms in Ronggeng Dugu Baruk to the dancer. And the fourth is to reveal translational orientation of the cultural terms translation. To answer research questions, I would apply 4 theories. The first theory is cultural terms theory by Peter Newmark. This theory tells us that cultural terms are classified to 5 groups. The second theory that I applied in this research is Technique of Translation Theory by Molina and Albir. According to this theory, there are 18 techniques of translation. The third theory that I use is Method of Translation Theory by Peter Newmark. According to the theory, there are 8 methods of translation. And the last theory that I use is Orientation of Translation Theory or Ideology of Translation. This theory is coined by Lawrence Venuti. According to this theory, 8 methods by Newmark that I have told before are classified to 2 groups. The first is domestication and the second is foreignization. To make this research effective, I will apply 2 methods. The first is primary method, that is observation. I will observe the text that belong to cultural terms in novel Ronggeng Dugu Baruk and its translation, The Dancer. And the secondary method that I would apply is interview. I will be conducting interview with the author of the source text of this novel, that is Ahmad Tohari. Material of this research are taken from the source text, that is Ronggeng Dugu Baruk, written by Ahmad Tohari, and its target text, that is The Dancer, that is written by Rene Lislov. At last but not least, we will tell you about the procedure of this research. The first, we must understand the definition and the classification of cultural terms. After we understand it, we may collect the cultural terms in the Indonesian novel and its translation. After collecting the about cultural terms and their translation, we decide the method and the technique of the translation. After that, we must find the definition of the cultural terms to make clear understanding from the terms. We also give suggestion about alternative translation when we found out translation. Last, we determine orientation of cultural terms translation with considering most applied translation methods. It is my presentation. I hope is understandable. I'm sorry for the mistakes. Wallahul muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.